History never ceases to amaze me, especially how society easily forgets things that made some of us shiver a few years back. Not because of the event, but the personality involved. Leslie Howard is one talent that touched humanity with a unique peculiarity. I still remember him, the Gone with the Wind actor, who ironically died in the wind. I heard he had something special with women and romantic vigor. Why women said Leslie Howard was good in bed? Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Matintas channel. Every man to himself, but God for all, may just be the experiences that formed the World War I military life of Leslie Howard, an adorable, shy, and highly sensitive gentleman who decided to switch careers and showcase his talent. As a youth, he was faced with a prevailing horror of war and was traumatized by the things he saw. I learned that he took to stage performance as an easier way of freeing his mind from the past eyesore and possibly to recuperate from unhealthy feelings. He started appearing on the London theater stage and within a few years made himself a celeb. Is it true that with Leslie Howard, ladies experienced a different kind of romantic feeling? Was he the most adored young man on stage and screen in his era? With his physical appearance, I guess very few would suppose Leslie Howard would attract more women to himself, not to talk of being an intense subject of female admiration, but the truth is that he did. Howard isn't handsome in the classic Hollywood Prince Charming sense of prettiness, or as husky as a typical playboy. He was not also the usual philanderer or ardent lover, not with a look that a writer described as much like an Oxford professor than that of an actor. Analysts say Leslie Howard is indifferent almost to the point of rudeness. Yet from the start of his stage career, he was overwhelmed by desirous women. This debonair English gentleman shined at playing disenchanted intellectuals and polite gentlemen in Britain and American cinemas for nearly 30 years. Sometime in the 1920s, Howard left for Broadway, where he got his applause in a series of well-received creations for many years. But he first appeared in Hollywood in the movie adaptation of one of his highly successful plays, Outward Bound, in 1930, a talent he reprised in The Animal Kingdom in 1933. The movie Gone with the Wind was remarkable in the life of Leslie Howard, though he was practically reluctant about the movie and was described as the most reluctant cast member that appeared in the movie. Reports have it that Leslie Howard only agreed to be part of the film because David Selznick promised that he would be the producer of Intermezzo. He wasn't the best choice to play the Ashley role, a non-American and 46 years, while Ashley's character should have been a 21-year-old fellow. Just as Vivien Leigh, an English actress, was made to play Southern Belle Scarlett O'Hara. I heard Leslie Howard didn't read the book or rehearse his lines before the filming. He had to quickly memorize a few lines on the day of shooting before the camera started rolling. It's also the reason he and Vivien Leigh didn't get along. I'll leave that to you to decide. I'm not beautiful or young enough for Ashley, and it makes me sick, being fixed up to look attractive. He was quoted referring to his unwillingness to play the role. It seemed Leslie Howard got tired of his typecast as a humble and reflective man, that he didn't feel accomplished with it. Hence, did not see acting as a well-meaning profession. This is what he was thinking during his communication with his daughter Duty, in which he noted that he hated that he was not as handsome, but had to depend on makeup for that. Leslie Howard was worried about the impending World War II and how it would impact his country. Unfortunately, he couldn't survive the horrible war. He tragically died when the plane he was traveling en route from Portugal to Germany was reportedly shot down by German firepower. While we regret the ugly incident, observers recall in dismay how the news about his death became more popular than his contribution to the entertainment industry. Fans were concerned with knowing who was responsible and why he had to die that way rather than his movies and other issues that defined his interesting career. Leslie Howard Steiner was born in Upper Norwood, London, to Lillian and Ferdinand Steiner. He is of Hungarian Jewish descent. Raised in London, Howard attended Allen School in London, as obtainable at that time. Howard was already settled as a young man trying to make ends meet, working as a bank clerk in Dulwich when the First World War started. Then he was a 21-year-old able-bodied young man whose services were needed at the front line. He was said to have voluntarily enlisted as a private with the British Army's Inns of Court Officer Training Corps in London, and a year after received a commission as a subaltern with the 31st Norman Hampshire Yeomanry, allowing him to train in England until May 1916, when he resigned his commission and was released from the British Army. At this time, Howard began to nurse the idea of a professional acting career, and soon joined the regional tours of Peg O' My Heart and Charlie's Aunt, and later saw himself performing on the London stage. His popularity endeared him to the United States Broadway Theater, where he excelled more in his stage works and became famous with plays like Aren't We All and Outward Bound. As an established Broadway star, it was only a matter of time before he showed up in Hollywood, and his opportunity came when the movie version of Outward Bound was produced. It seems he didn't quite appreciate his first Hollywood experience, and so he decided to focus on his stage performance, until such time he felt inspired to give Hollywood another try. That was several years later, when he repeated the Standish role in the film adaptation of Berkeley Square in 1933. His love for stage performance would continue as a significant part of his career. Creatively inclined, he often mixed acting with producing, and sometimes directing shows on Broadway. Of course, he was a notable dramatist. Those who worked with Howard said he liked to play Shakespeare, but could be very indolent about studying his lines. Some of the performances that made him famous was playing Romeo and Juliet. His marriage with Ruth Martin began in 1916 and produced 2 children, Winky and Duty, both of which followed their father in the acting industry. Recall that Duty appeared alongside her father and David Niven in The First of the Few, showing as a nurse to David Niven's character. She also played a major role in the film life story of Howard, Leslie Howard, the man who gave a damn. It's a known fact that Howard won the admiration of many ladies and became a ladies' man of sorts, even though he saw himself in a different light about his philandering with several women. When asked why he followed many women, Howard argued that he never chased women, even though it would not be good to stay away from them when they came knocking on the door. He didn't chase women, but would never run away from them. The philosophy that saw him reportedly dating the likes of Tallulah Bankhead when they met on the UK stage in Her Cardboard Lover in 1927. Many other illicit affairs were recorded for Howard with his leading ladies while still married to his wife, including one with Merle Oberon. That affair began while the two filmed The Scarlet Pimpernel in 1934. Did women say Howard was good in bed? Was it the reason they thronged around him like bees? Some say he was just very proud, like millions of men who find themselves puzzled by their genetic makeup. He was no doubt a fine performer, gentle but not as attractive as one would have expected, prompting critics to wonder if there was a grapevine in the ladies' room about him being perfect in bed, the reason they got into elation over him. It made sense to believe it, because he loved to exploit what was thrown his way. Once in the closet, he performs his manly magic on the women and would leave them high and dry, with many of them perpetually seduced. I also heard he had a fling with a Spanish actress, Conchita Montenegro, after appearing with her in the movie Never the Twain Shall Meet in 1931. Conchita, who was married to a member of the far-right Phalangist Party, would later claim that Howard used her fascist connections to tell General Franco, supposedly to ask the tyrant not to participate in the war. Among the many love gossips about Howard's romantic affairs is one with Norma Shearer, while the duo filmed The Animal Kingdom. There were even reports that he fathered a daughter, identified as Carol Grace in 1924, with Roisin Marcus. Howard was lucky to have married Ruth, his wife who was very accommodating in his life. He also ran to her for safety when he felt overwhelmed by the number of ladies rooting for him, and the solid affection Ruth offered amidst strange women may have been reassuring. Analysts said Ruth perfectly understood her husband's issue and was wise and sympathetic in her longing to assist him. A story was told of how she would crash into Leslie Howard's dressing room after a performance, when adoring girls surrounded him. She would walk up to him and say, "What are you going to do about the baby's cold?" Or she would say, "Don't forget you have an appointment with a chiropodist." Those kinds of words usually set the women around him away in disgust, so she could have her husband to herself. Even when Howard turned to Hollywood, Ruth still acted as a shield against overzealous and desirous women. The women often saw Ruth as an obstacle, but also knew that they were legally married. It seemed women were doing their best just to have him in their bed, but Ruth always showed up at the wrong time. At some point, a story was reported of their severed relationship, with the gossip media suggesting that Howard would marry a beautiful English actress the moment it was over with Ruth. Howard had met young, slender, blonde, and beautiful Ruth while she was working as a bank clerk, and then came the war. After a brief courtship, they were married in St. Mary's on the Wall, an old church on the ruins of a Roman fortress. War engagement separated the couple, and Ruth returned to her family, hoping that her heartthrob returned from the war alive. And she was lucky to have him back after the war, and Howard began his stage shows. When the news of Howard's death broke, a lot of questions were asked as to what may have led to that ugly incident: mistaken identity or deadly espionage. Several years later, lots of fans are yet to come to terms with the fact that this gentleman had to die such a horrible death. At some point in history, the actor's plane case was reopened by Claire Colvin with more questions. The plane conveying the film star went down over the Bay of Biscay, an incident carried out by the Luftwaffe. Unlike the usual wartime battle, the aircraft was a civilian jet that went regularly from non-aligned Portugal to a mini airfield close to Bristol. I learned there was a casual agreement on the warring faction to respect the non-alignment nature of civilian airplanes from countries not involved in the conflict. Reports say that the incident on the 1st of June 1943 broke that agreement because 6 Junkers Ju-88 fighters jumped in and struck an unarmed Douglas DC-3. All 13 passengers and 4 crew members on the Dutch plane were eliminated, and painfully, the remains of the plane were never recovered from the sea. Facts available show that the German pilot first opened fire, so it's reasonable to assume who did the damage. The main source of the controversy became why the plane was attacked, rather than who did the attack. The news of the incident went viral and sent a shockwave across Britain, and of course delighted the German propaganda preacher, Dr. Goebbels. His death came while he was at the pinnacle of his success in Hollywood, especially with his outings in The Scarlet Pimpernel, Pygmalion, and Gone with the Wind, and had surrendered his payments to ease himself out of his contract so he could return to Britain to join the war effort. Leslie Howard produced propaganda films for the Ministry of Information and personally directed and featured in 2 movies that critics think annoyed the German propaganda machine. Recall that Pimpernel Smith was about liberating young Jewish refugees from the German fortress, and the first of the few was about the creator of the Spitfire, which boosted confidence during the Battle of Britain. He also made public letters to America aimed at winning the then neutral U.S. over to the British side before the U.S. officially joined the war. And he was said to have visited Ireland on a peacemaking assignment with the anti-British leader Eamon de Valera. The theory of mistaken identity tried to establish a possible case that a prime minister was in Algiers at the time, monitoring advances in the Mediterranean, and was anticipated to fly back soon. Another possible target would be the mining technician Ivan Sharp, who was thought to be accumulating supplies of wolfram en route to Portugal against the interest of the German weaponry industry. There were just too many calculations as to who may have been targeted in the attack. Even the ill-fated airliner was the last of 4 planes the Dutch KLM pilots had saved following the German invasion of Holland, and had recorded double attacks on the Bristol-Lisbon route before the incident. Howard's vibrant life and career story would not be complete without a careful mention of his long-standing affair with Violet Cunnington, his Hollywood lover, while his patient wife Ruth remained at home in England with their 2 children. Howard met Cunnington in 1938 when he was doing Pygmalion. Then she was the secretary for Gabriel Pascal, the producer of the film. As the two fell in love, she also became Howard's secretary and romantic partner. The duo moved to the U.S. and lived together while he filmed Gone with the Wind and Intermezzo. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Handsome Leslie Howard has also been involved in affairs. But do you want to know why Vivien Leigh slept with strangers to satisfy her desires? Watch this video.